Hello, I'm Mr. Howard Yu. Happy Chinese New Year. As this week I'm going through with my P6 student on the topic of energy conversion. And this is a typical review worksheet where I go through with my student. Firstly, I will go through with them about a key doctrine in this topic, which is energy cannot be created or destroyed, but be converted from one form to another. So I review with students about firstly the kinetic energy or kinetic energy KE, where this energy actually is present in any objects or any things that has movement. Example, a moving car, wind, or flowing water, and also the factors affecting kinetic energy, which is basically the mass and the speed of the object. Or in secondary one, you will learn about this thing called velocity. So in this example, I asked students to compare the change in kinetic energy using an object of 2 kilogram but moving at two different speed, one at 3 meters per second and the other double the speed at 6 meters per second. So from this calculation, although this calculation is not required for PSLE, but I like students to appreciate that if you increase the speed of an object of the same mass, double, the kinetic energy will be increased by actually 4 times. So if you increase by 3 times of the speed, the kinetic energy will increase by 9 times. So there are also different applications of kinetic energy in here involved. And next, we move on to potential energy. And I tell them that there are three types of potential energy, namely gravitational potential energy, chemical potential energy, and elastic potential energy. So in general, some schools, they teach students just to classify these three into one, but because they would be progressing to secondary one. So it's best that they know the specific potential energy. So in this example, it's very good that they know that any object that is above the ground from a reference point, they will possess gravitational potential energy. And I also introduce them to the formula involving in gravitational potential energy, which is actually mass times gravity times height. Although this is not required, but as you know, for science, we like to stimulate the students' understanding by giving them actual scientific proven formulas. So this GPE is actually mass times gravity times height. And similarly, we can ask students to use two scenarios, object of same mass but drop at different heights. So they will be able to appreciate that if the height is increased by 2 times, the gravitational potential energy will double. And then next will be the elastic potential energy, which is present in all elastic objects, for example, in springs, in elastic bands, etc. And finally, chemical potential energy is stored in food and fuel and also in batteries. So I asked them to name examples of chemical potential energy. So I say that the French fry that you like to eat, the durians you like to eat, all these have chemical potential energy. And some students nowadays they bring along their power banks. The power bank also store chemical potential energy. Likewise, the candle also store chemical potential energy as the candle is being burned as a fuel. So now I'd like to introduce you to some specific PSLE questions where students will be challenged to use what they have learned, the scientific concepts, in applications. So this is also something where parents is more concerned with. So I'd like to share with you these questions in a short while. Okay, let's examine these typical PSLE questions on energy conversion. So in these examples, you can read as I show you on the screen here. Thomas wants to investigate if potential energy is affected by the height of the object using the setup below. So in this case, students must identify this is investigating the gravitational potential energy. So he dropped the ball from a certain height onto a container of sand. The ball created a circular dent and he measured the depth of the dent. He repeated the experiment using balls of various mass and height of release. His results are shown below. So these are the results. So there are 4 setups. So in these questions, which 2 setups should he use to investigate his experiment? So when the student look at this question, the student must understand what is the aim of the experiment, as I have previously highlighted here, is to investigate if the potential energy, which is a GPE, gravitational potential energy, is affected by the height of the object. So mentally, the student must identify from the 4 setups. He or she must choose the setup that only the height differs, but the mass remains the same. So actually, if you look at these 4 setups, you can actually identify 2 sets. However, some students, they are careless, they only identify 1 set. So which are the 2 sets? Of course, you can see here, can you choose the first set with the same mass, perhaps 20 gram, but they are released at different height? So from here, let me use this pen to highlight to you. So here, can you see this is 20 gram and this is setup R? Yes. And can you choose another setup with 20 grams? Of course, there's only one set here, which is T. And you notice that these 2 setups, the balls are of the same mass, 20 grams, but they are released at different heights. One is at 30, the other is at 40. So this is one set, is setup R and T. And let's look, there's another setup. Can you see this is 30 gram, and also 30 gram? Means they have the same mass and they are released at different height, one at 50 and at 40. So the other setup is S and U. So in this answer, which is only 1 mark, the student must give the 2 setup. So the first setup is setup R and T, and the second setup is S and U. So this is what I mean by using the information here to get the results. Let us proceed to the next questions. Okay, let's look at this question here. This is application questions using the first part, and this is very typical of all PSLE questions. So they say fruit A and fruit B are from the same tree. Of course, it's durian tree. They drop from the tree when they are ripe, because as you know, durian actually, when they are ripe, they falls down due to the pull of gravity. So there's one assumption we make here, that actually the bigger fruit B has a greater mass. So here, Thomas concluded that fruit B has more potential energy. So in this case, is actually because it's hanging up in a tree, right? So we tell student that this is actually investigating gravitational potential energy. Okay, so Thomas concluded that fruit B has more potential energy than fruit A at the same height, which actually is a theoretical fact. But however, there's a requirement here. Using his result, explain how he arrived at his conclusion. Using his results. That means using the results here. Okay, using the results here. How can he make such conclusions? So let's continue again by reviewing these questions in a short while. Okay, let's return here. So in the student's answer, he must use the table presented to explain that fruit B has more potential energy than fruit A. Okay, in this example, that means he must choose a setup where the mass is greater but drop from the same height. The mass is greater but drop from the same height. So which should you choose? The mass is greater but drop from the same height. So let us review the answer here. Okay, so this is the model answer which I've prepared. So using the data from here, you can see T and U, which I've highlighted here. Can you see that T is actually 20 grams and U is 30 grams, and they are dropped from the same height at 40 meters, 40 centimeters. But the result is the one with the greater mass, which is in setup U, created a dent of 4 centimeters deep. So this is the experimental result. So in the answer, because there's a requirement, say using his result, explain how he arrived at his conclusion. Yeah. So this is the part where most students they may not be able to use the data presented to give the proper answer. So this is how I teach the student. So you must direct the examiner attention to which data you are using. So clearly we can see that T and U, which is set up T and U, as you can see here, show that when balls drop from the same height, which from the same height, can you see is 40 centimeters, the ball with the greater mass will make a deeper dent. So this is the result. And how do you explain? Okay, since Durand B is bigger, as I mentioned to you earlier, we assume that B is bigger and is of the same type, so you will result in a greater mass. So since Durand B is bigger, it should have a greater mass and have more potential energy. So this is the answers to these questions because the student must explain how he arrived at this conclusion. Let's continue with the part C. Other than the depth of the dent, the fruit can create, which is already presented here, other than the depth of the dent, when they are dropped from the tree, what observation could Thomas use to confirm his conclusion? So this is actually a little bit linked to reality, real life example. If you drop something, of course, like in this situation, can you hear the bang from a table? Okay, when something hits a hard surface, sound is produced. So there's a conversion of something from great height with gravitational potential energy being converted to kinetic energy during the drop. And when it impact a surface, sound energy is produced. So in this question, the student should answer, when the fruit hit the ground, the fruit with more potential energy will convert to more kinetic energy and hit the ground with a louder sound. Because it says that what observation could Thomas use to confirm his conclusion? So he can actually saying give the answer by saying that a louder sound will be heard from the fruit with a greater mass. So this is an example of using applications, using concepts to answer the questions effectively. And I wish all the P6 students learn this skill early, because from now, which is just in the Chinese New Year season, you have about, let's count March, April, May, June, July, August. So usually most of the prelim will be in August or even July. You have about 6 months left. And then if you continue, September, October, about 7.5 months to take up the challenge of taking the actual PSLE exam, where this year will be the first batch of P6 students. They'll be using the AL system instead of the mark system. So I encourage students to consider enrolling into my science coaching in one academy. So this is the worksheet I've specially created to help students to understand the concepts, drill them in uh, appreciating the scientific concepts to real life examples, and also using realistic past year's paper or even some of the top school paper to drill them answering questions. And also, most importantly, is to inspire them to like science. So I'm Mr. Howard Yu. I wish you all the best. If you like to get your child to have a free trial, you can contact me at my number 8268 5299. So I wish you all the best during this, and shortly I will show you the address where you can contact me. So dear parents and students, you can contact me at 8268 5299 to enroll your child for a free trial for science. And if they sign up during this period, they will receive a free mini drone. Actually, this free mini drone, I also use it to teach energy conversion, because as you notice, the battery actually stores chemical potential energy, which can be converted to electrical energy as the drone is being powered up. So if I activate the transmitter, the electrical energy will be converted to kinetic energy of the blade at its spin. And then as the drone lifts up with a sound and lights, the electrical energy is also being converted into light energy and sound energy. And as being lifted higher, the kinetic energy is being converted to gravitational potential energy. As I fly the drone around, the student will be excited. Wow, Mr. Yu is flying the drone, and I want to be a drone pilot. So this is how I inspire students to relate what they have learned into real life application. Because as Singapore's will become the aviation hub in the next 10 to 20 years, drone piloting is actually a very good career to consider. And you can also sign up for Mr. Quack class at his number here 91160 387. Mr. Quack is very good in coaching students even up to JC level, as he was a former maths HOD in Serangoon JC. So for myself, I coach students from P3 to secondary 1. I also have one very good chemistry teacher. He's currently coaching my Sec 2 student and Sec 3 student to prepare for their O levels chemistry. So I wish you all the best, and I hope that every one of you can benefit from our inspiring science and mathematics coaching. Happy New Year and God bless.